Happy Thursday, everybody. Season 1, episode 28. Nick also made me nervous again today. You did warn me though this time, Nick.
Yes.
You did say, "Hey, I'm probably gonna be in a little bit late."
Yes, I will. I'm gonna drop real quick because I am lagging significantly. I will be right back. I need to get a hard wire in.
All right, we'll see you here in a little bit.
Yeah. I'll be right back.
So while Nick is rebooting, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump in and start talking about today's episode. So today's episode, we're getting a long-term guest back. So a good friend of the show. I think he's probably, he's setting the record for most appearances on the show. And, you know, if you read the LinkedIn announcement, I think I've given him a new moniker. So we're going to start calling him the Mad Scientist Developer because he goes into his lab. He comes out with some of the coolest things. So with that, we're going to go ahead and bring in Fynesy.
Hey.
Happy Thursday, Fynesy. How you doing, buddy?
Good to see you, Nicky. Doing well. Yourself?
Doing all right. What'd you think about the LinkedIn post where I called you a mad scientist?
Loved it. And I was telling you earlier, I looked on the TV in bed last night, and there's coming up tomorrow the CF Weekly with Fynesy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Man, what does this make? This is what, the 4th, 5th episode you've been on? Maybe more.
I think I'm in the 3 or 4 section. Yeah, I'm trying. It's all a blur because I love listening to the show. I'm quiet in the chat window a lot of the times, but I think I've been on the screen. That must be number 3, I'm guessing.
Well, man, it's always fun to have you on. I'm sure Nick will have some information when he comes on and talk about it as well. But it's always fun to have you coming on, and you truly are. You're becoming a mad scientist. I mean, some of the stuff that you're doing in Cloud Foundry is awesome. And it's not only it's not just thought exercises, but you're coming up with stuff that will truly help foundations, will truly help developers and platforms engineers. If you haven't seen it, you know, we'll put a link in for the episode where he came in and talked about his Java optimizer. I mean, that was something that was pretty groundbreaking, right? It opened up a lot of thought for, you know, TAS on the edge. It opened up the thought for, you know, foundations as build systems. So you're doing a lot of really cool stuff. And I think we're going to end up talking, you know, one of your newest experiments, what your newest Frankenstein is that you came up with in the lab. Welcome back, Nick.
Yeah.
I think he's still frozen.
Uh-oh. Let's see if he comes in on.
No, he's
there he is. Is there movement? There's movement.
I'm going to try again. Keep going.
You're still lagging hard, buddy.
I'll be right back. Keep going.
As Nick dials up his Wi-Fi version, yeah. No, I will tell you, Nicky, that there's I had a chat with one of our data scientists last month, and we were talking about hosting in bespoke platforms that are, you know, turnkey capable versus building your platform. And she said to me, well, you know, I can't remember how the phrase was, something like, well, with Cloud Foundry, it's only layer 7 ingress, or with Cloud Foundry, you can't open 2 ports, or with Cloud, I can't remember, but there was some reference to something she said that Cloud Foundry cannot do. And I said, you should watch my latest podcast with Nicky and team, because it was literally flying in the face of, I just demoed that last week. Yes, you can. Right. And it's you know, it's on us to get the word out that there's, you can still be on a happy path, but it may be a path less traveled. There's capabilities in the platform that, like, I think I said it on the last time I was on, droplet portability. When you think that through, you're like, wait a minute. You can play with images on a small footprint foundation that you could actually theoretically have a foundation you're not even using the build packs on. Because that was an edge argument I had. Again, Cloud Foundry can't work at the edge because people don't want to be building containers at the edge. And I thought, there's another example of, you know, a little bit more knowledge needs to get out there about what the capabilities are of the platform and how flexible it is, even though it's coming opinionated. And we'll see today. There's a few tricks you can do to wield that opinion a little bit, to do some things you may not know it can do.
Well, you know, that episode kicked off. So we had an interesting conversation when we were at Explorer with the oil and gas industry guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he was telling us that one of the things that they do is when the guys are going out to rigs and they're going out to drilling platforms, that, you know, there's a couple things that they have, right? They need to have a certain set of software available to them that they can use, but they don't always have network connectivity. So they're trying to figure out, looking at K8s, they're looking at other ways to, how to keep this updated and how can we make this work for the guys that are out there on the factories. And he had watched the episode and came back and said it gave us an idea because we use TAS today, TPCF today. And it gave us the idea of what y'all were talking about. If we could load the droplet and have a place for that to sit when their networking and their computer setup comes online, when it does attach to the network, can we have a little script that goes out and looks for the latest droplet, gets it on there for the moment or two that they're on, on network, and then they can use that by just hitting, whatever their little URL is locally for their application. And the same thing when it connects back up, upload the data. I thought that was a great use case, right? And with small footprint, you could put this on a single machine. That's not a problem. You could probably put this on a laptop if you wanted to run it. Still have all of your TAS stuff. And, I think that's one of the things when we start talking about this, to your point, people were saying, hey, there's a lot of things that Cloud Foundry can't do. Well, I think people have this perception in their head to say Cloud Foundry is only good at running applications. That's not true. There's all kinds of use cases out there that we can do. And, as episodes come up, we're going to be starting to talk about some of these, data, services only foundations. We're talking about edge use cases. But I think the one thing that always comes up, which is going to be our topic today, is the logging, right? That is one of the things, good or bad. CF produces a lot of logs. It just does. Now, on the good side, everything that happens. On the bad side, what do you do with these logs, right? And this is one of the things you're going to talk about us today. You want to go ahead and introduce that?
Yeah, sure. Just to finish the thought process.
Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Hey, he's back. I think you're with a decent frame rate this time, it seems.
Yep. Cool.
Just to finish that thought process on the edge. No one would have even conceived of a plan of a Cloud Foundry Foundation not using build packs. They've been there since it was adopted from Heroku, 12 years ago or more. I think you'll see use cases where Cloud Foundry may not even run apps, where that marketplace and that magic of Bash behind the scenes, we may be an API gateway there or something like that. But again, you're thinking of use cases and we're thinking outside the box. My one for today is around logging, because I had many conversations over the years where the security team are trying to make sense of the platform. Once they get it, they're like, this is great. This is immutable. This can be repaved. But on the path to getting that sort of level of enlightenment about it's how it works, the panic hits like, wait a minute, if something crashes, if something exploited and it like the platform deletes it, how can I do the forensic audit on the thing that's gone? I'm like, well, that's what the logs are for. Everything is being logged on every subsystem in the platform. But they have to think different. This is both immutable at the bottom, but ephemeral at the top. Those AI containers they're cattle. And if they get sick, they get destroyed and replaced with ones that work. And that's how we get that incredible HA story under the platform. There was a quick tangent. I remember doing we call them dojos, an enablement, and we're at the tail end of the enablement for this very large insurance company, and they were doing failure testing, and someone went into the vSphere layer and started taking pot shots at VMs, just shutting them down. And the platform had 3 AZs and 3 clusters and just kept running. No impact. They were able to run with the apps n-1 for a few seconds, and they went back up to n. And, passed the test there. And then someone said, what's that in the vCenter screen? And we're like, oh, that's the platform self-healing. We're like, what? Wait a minute. Yeah, the platform has we were using the Resurrector plugin, actually, the Bosch engine. And it was recreating or restarting, whichever it was, the machine that was lost. And they were paused and saying, why didn't you tell us about this? We had no idea that self-healing is built in. And that was another one of those, learnings from forever ago of people seeing the platform do things they didn't realize it could do until deep into some testing. So the logging side is the story for today. And this comes from many a conversation, many a customer about the sheer volume of logs coming out of the platform. You're right, Nikki. It's a blessing and a curse, right? If you want to have complete visibility, you're afraid to not log anything. But if you're logging everything, send a really big hard drive or give one of the enterprise logging providers a ton of cash, because you're going to have a lot of data to go index that night. And
Splunk loves Cloud Foundry.
Oh, they do. Yep. Indeed. And so the conversation I remember having, actually, you remember this one. One of them was around, this is a HIPAA compliant app, which means we have to prove we're auditing when anyone fails to log into the app. And so you could send the kitchen sink of logs, and the UAA is one of our components, and our SSO tile is a little wrapper on an auth domain on there. So the logging is taking place for every successful and every failed login across all the platform. But talk about the needle in the haystack, that you're going to look at terabytes of logs a day, and you need 10 lines of logs a day. And you can do that in any log system, but it's going to be a lot of indexing and a lot of reasoning over a lot of logs. So the question became, is there any way you can give somebody the logs they care about? Can you mask up? They don't care about platform apps. They don't care about NATs. They don't care about kernel level. So could I give you a dedicated feed? Then another one came along, and they were interested in auditing where the platform is touching downstream systems because they want to add more controls with application security groups. But before they get there, they'd like to actually audit. What are those platform apps that are hosted in there talking to you today? What connections are they making out? So they want to go into an existing large-scale deployment and build a report that's not driven off of CMD, but it's driven off the real world, where the actual IP table logs are being put into a specific report that they can use. They can then come in and enforce. So let's see if I can share a screen here.
Quick,
Well, and while you're bringing up your screen, so I remember the HIPAA compliance one, right? And we've got things built into the commercial side. You can go in and use Rainier script to kind of parse your logs, what you want to bring in, what you don't. But one of the things that I think was kind of the, where people got hung up is, okay, well, maybe we want to take this one log output, UAA logs, right? I want all failures to log in to go to one place. I want all successful logs to go to another place, and all the other logs I can just ship off to some random server where we'll have them, but they're not really costing us a lot of money. And, with Rainier script, you can do that. But let's be honest, there's not a lot of people out there that know Rainier script. It can be difficult to get the syntax right. So hopefully what you're going to show us makes that a lot easier. Yeah.
That's exactly it. So I was looking at, the way I introduced this before I started playing on the keyboard, I heard one of the original product managers have a great line and said, we built this log stream generator that just happens to run apps. The volume of logs was like huge. But in return for us not having blind spots from our ability to observe what's happening in Cloud Foundry, we have a lot of logs to process. And it really brought up the question, what do people care about? Can we give them the subset of those logs that they care about? Like our friend of the show, Dave Zenzian, was very excited on the security side. But, there could be a lot of logs he doesn't care about. So when I showed him this recently, he was like, yeah, this, he got excited thinking about the subset of the logs that would be in his domain. And I thought that was great. So the question was, how could we pre-filter? And, it could be app owners wanting something specific, could be some platform health checks, could be a security compliance type thing. We need a filter. And the big picture we're used to is, and that I should have drawn the line really thick, but we have a syslog feed fit to some syslog sync, something that processes a lot of logs. Well, as we know, Deshaun and the team on the Spring side are always creating incredible magic. And there's a project that's been around for quite a while called Spring Cloud Dataflow. And this was a very interesting one because I saw this from an app side first. I saw this where I was working with an architect, did a system of records, did some APIs, huge volumes, 50 million calls a day. And they're just sitting on top of an Oracle database. And then every night, it would go off, or every second night they'd export to a Teradata. And then a couple of days after that, there'd be exports or subsets exported and allowed to be given to the relevant parties that would be caring about that traffic. And that feedback loop was too slow. So they had this project. They said they want to create a real-time wiretap style project where they would offer event streams in the moment rather than batches every 3 days. And we started looking at Spring Cloud Dataflow because they didn't want to code it to Kafka or code it to Rabbit. even though either one of them could do the job, they didn't want to bet on one of them or to a cloud native messaging environment. And so Springtail Dataflow became part of the conversation because the magic of this is this can sit on top of your messaging provider of choice and abstract their native messaging APIs away. And it's essentially a Spring Boot microservices-based engine, a framework for tying them and stitching them together to let us build either stream or batch processing type tasks. And I thought, ooh, if I ever had a really interesting stream to send into this ecosystem, what could I do? And so I have a domain-specific language for hammering out streams where I just tell it how I want to stitch these things together. We'll have a look at building streams visually. We already mentioned the protocol backend. And we'll have a look at the menu of, they call them applications, but you kind of get source adapters, you got processors in the middle, and you got sync. So think of it: source, process, target. And it runs everywhere. There's the really interesting part is this is already natively in the Tanzu pre-CF marketplace. It's been there for quite a while. And what that means is that we can create this. I did Martha Stewart that part because it takes 20 minutes. Because under the covers, I've told it to go create a rabbit cluster to be the backbone for the streams. Create a database for your state management of the system itself. But I don't care. I just go in and click create this plan and come back after a cup of coffee. But then this interesting thing happens where you say, well, how would I ever use something in Cloud Foundry to process Syslog? Syslog's not a HTTP protocol, it's a TCP protocol. And this is where the magic of the TCP router kicks in, because we don't, again, talk about it as much, but it's this another kind of platform superpower. It's my superpower series of hidden features in the platform where you can go layer 4 into the platform and you can have an extremely resilient way, because you can have your load balancer sit on top of multiple, what we call TCP routers. And those TCP routers are going to have a port allocated, and they're going to be able to find a specific app in the platform and relay traffic into that. And the connectivity tissue between the bank of TCP routers and whatever instances of your app, as it scales elastically or explicitly, is all wired up for you and managed by the platform. And so I thought, if I could get a Syslog listener into Taz as an app, would it be possible for me to be able to open up a door so that it could listen for raw Syslog ingress? And that was the first step in sort of this exploration I was doing. And I actually kicked this off a couple of years ago, and it kind of got back on my radar this year. Again, I was talking to our friend David on the security side, and it became a very, very interesting thing to kind of dust off and take a look at one more time. So let's take a look.
Let me pause you there for a second, because you bring up something that I think is important, right? So TCP routing is something that most people don't know about in the foundation. So, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, our TCP routers are based off of HA proxy, I believe, highly resilient. And like you said, you could put a load balancer in front of those and expose TCP routes. So, you know, you're going to give us an example of where that's helpful here for our Syslog, but we've also got other examples, right? If you've got MySQL out there and your developers want to connect to it with MySQL Workbench, this provides an easy way to do that. You know, there are other methods. You can do SSH, you know, tunneling to get through that. But by providing a specific route, you're able to do UI into data services. You're able to provide TCP routes into applications. And this is something most people don't know about. So, you know, hell, we may put that on a back, you know, something that we need to bring up and do a little bit more on in another episode.
Yeah, like this is a really interesting ingress capability. I always look at, like, as we compare to Kubernetes, and we have all the flexibility in the world over there, but we have to engineer a lot more over there. And it's not cleanly multi-tenant without a lot of work setting up the operating model on top of it. Supremely flexible. And I do think it's an and discussion, but in this case, I always dream of the scenario here being when we deploy the Cloud Foundry Foundation, we have so much of what I call the batteries included that we need very, very little around us. In this case, I'm even thinking about either the same or a different foundation to be your log preprocessor. Again, we know how to land the foundation really easily. We could stick this in an ISO segment and have it on a separate cluster and have it run in a way, being our engine that's going to allow us to, in an agile way, create up various fit-for-purpose speeds and feeds. Let's take a look at it though. I pop over to this space I have here, and ignore these apps for the moment. But if I go to my marketplace, I can create a Spring Cloud data flow. And I could click here to create it. I would give it a name, hit create. When I do that, I get back a service. Here we have DS1, and we pop into this guy. And if we hit manage, it'll send us off into a visual tool. Now, when we started the app up for the first time, I clicked add, and I added the Rabbit backbone application starters. And there's other choices. You could use Kafka as a backbone, but Rabbit's included in the marketplace. So when I click that middle one, I have nothing to do. It's just ready to go. And you can use it for task processing as well. So think of any sorts of high volume event-driven applications. The platform is an awesome place to host that, but the framework needs to fit the use case. And so we can write microservices, REST services, and systems of engagement super easily in the platform. This is more pipes and filters. This is a bucket parade or a simple event-driven or even a complex event-driven flow. And we want to be able to put it all together. So let's just start with the most basic, because I want to just introduce data flow first. So the simplest thing I can do, I can go visual or I can go domain-specific language. But if I want to create a basic stream, notice I've got these source adapters. And this is why that layer 4 load balance, the ingress support is really important. Yeah, I can do HTTP. I could be an FTP target. If I wanted, if I dial up my ephemeral storage, I could. If I want to mount a volume, I can have very interesting other choices besides HTTP for ingress. I can use Syslog, which we're going to come back to in a minute. But before we
Tell you what, could you blow that up for us a little bit? Is that possible?
Sure. Yeah, that any better?
Yeah, I'm going to take us off screen so maybe we could see it a little bit better.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, that's much better.
Cool. So yeah, you got all these different source adapters. These are the ones in the box, and you can write your own. You can build and augment this, but you can tie together an application from any one of these source protocols that's going to be that listener. And then you get, and by the way, the origins of this come from a project called Spring Integration that Mark Fisher started a long time ago. And if you look at Gregor Hopp's book on the enterprise integration patterns, again, this is where this whole tech came from. Can we have a domain-specific language for event-driven apps, stream-based apps? And the adapter's source processor and sync model look at our targets. We can dump things into Mongo. We can send things to a JDBC target. We could put things on a WebSocket or on somebody else's queue. We could dump things to an S3 store. And these are all different targets we can go to. Most simple flow you can do, and I could drag and drop. I can just do time and pipe that into log. That's the simplest stream you can make. And then I hit create, and we can call that time log to create the stream by name. And once it's here, we can then say deploy. And we're in the lab, so I'm going to just shave a little bit of the memory off, and I hit deploy. That was 4 button clicks. What's going to happen behind the scenes? Time is a little test source. This is going to print into the message buffer the current time every second. Log is one we're going to use a lot today, and that's again a little testing sync where it'll just log out the messages coming into that particular brick in the flow.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened when I said deploy of this guy was it went down to the underlying platform, and then we have, again, this is not limited. This can run in Cloud Foundry, as we're seeing, like with 3 button clicks. It has an operator in the Kubernetes world, and it can run on your laptop. This is a really super platform and messaging middleware abstraction layer that just works for us. Now, what it's doing though, and I could have adjusted these counts for HA purposes in that set of properties on the right. It's going to deploy an app for every box in the flow. It's going to deploy an app for the source. It's going to deploy a box for each of the processors. It's going to deploy for the target. And these are in the application suite I've provided a bunch of Spring Boot apps under the covers. And so if we go and we look at our apps, let's see which one. Where am I in the right place? No, I want to see it. And let's go in here. And we should see that this time logger app, if we trail those logs in just a minute, we should hopefully see that come up. And what it's doing is it's not only bringing staging these two applications and giving them any configuration we want, but it's also connecting them to underlying rabbit queues and doing all that messaging middleware for us. And see these logs that are being printed? These are messages that are originating from the upstream box on the flow, the source box, the time one. And so very simple, but that's how we can send messages through like this. Now let's do this. Let's say I want to do a new stream. What I did was I deployed, let me think about this for a second, where to go next. Yeah, let's kill this guy. I have too many pieces. I'm not linear in my thinking. Keep me on the tracks here. What I did was I deployed CF Syslog. Now, when you go to create a stream, you don't have to create a stream that has everything in it. You can create what are called named destinations or taps. And that allows you to create a stream and then reuse an output of that stream in other streams. So this one has the Syslog adapter as the source. Look at that, listening on port 51,000.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to go to a log demo. It's going to go to a named destination called CF Syslog. That means if I want to write something, I can go and I can create a stream, and I can say CF Syslog. I could do it down here too. I can do a tap, and I can then put, if I wanted to, I could connect that to the log, and it would be, it would be basically called CF Syslog, and you pipe that into log. Now this is a separate flow that's looking at essentially the queue underneath. But I can write 1, 2, 3, 5 of these guys, and I can have them go into different targets. But they're all predicated on this upstream system that's actually deploying a real Syslog adapter and feeding this thing I can subscribe to in lots of other pipes. So what I've got going here is I have this already, and we go to our apps. We have the log tester here. So let's stream those logs out. Let's go to the log test. Logs on that guy. And because I don't want to, hammer this lab environment that's got, minimal configurations for a lot of things, I actually stopped the app that was listening for the logs. So I'm going to start it up again now. And so once I start this guy up, we should eventually, once it's launched, it should start reading logs. Now, this guy is a Syslog listener, listening on port 51,000, but it's been configured with a TCP ingress route. And I told the platform, hey, send your Syslogs over there. So if we dip underneath the curtains a little bit, the system logging of the platform itself is going to the IP internally where that TCP router is, or the load balancer in front of it, and the 51,000. So we told the platform, send your Syslogs from everything associated with TAS to that endpoint. That endpoint is a TCP router that's going to route into this Syslog adapter. And that Syslog adapter now is going to send it into the Spring Cloud Dataflow ecosystem so that we can now play with it and we can use it in other flows and streams.
So break this down. Let's simplify this for me a little bit. So when we're talking about the tap, so we've got the first initial, which is the syslog, and you're sending it to the destination.
Yep. When
you put a tap in there, is the purpose of the tap to say you've got a lot of different things from syslog going in there? Is that tap, is the purpose of that tap to pull out maybe 1 or 2 different entries into that log? What's the purpose of the tap here?
Yeah. So in this case, this is not doing anything functional, because we could have simply just said syslog straight to log and it would have been the exact same. Where it gets interesting is, and while that's deploying and starting up, and we'll give it some time to see if it wakes up for us, we could do a stream where we say, hey, I would like to just get logs from, say, the UAA. So if we come over here and we say we want UAA logs, I could say CF syslog, and we're going to pipe it into filter. And from there, we could go into log, pipe into log. Oops. And in this case, now what we're going to do is we're going to tell that filter, I don't want to log everything. I just want to log UAA messages. So we can come in here and we'd say in our function, and I have a little cheat here. We want to say that in the filter, we only want the UAA logs to pop up.
Okay.
And by putting this in, this filter now would create UAA logs. Now I could just log it directly, but it might be more useful for me that if I do it this way, I would say, we'll give this guy a name. Let's not do a name. Let's do a destination. And we can call it. See a way we can play with this. And we can say we want to call this UAA syslog. And now we have a filter. I have to clean this up a bit here. So now we would have a named pipe that we can play with for different streams that is only going to show UAA logs. And this is where it gets interesting, because now we have another system that is defining only some of the log entries. So let's take a look over here at how we're doing.
All right. So let me see if I'm following along here. So now we've got a stream that is just UAA logs. Now I can reference that stream and say, hey, I only want to see failures and I want to send those somewhere else. Then I can use your UAA syslog.
Exactly.
Basically, use that as the starting stream and then filter out, okay, I want all my failures to go to this place. All other logs go to another place.
Exactly.
Cool.
Now look at all these log entries we're getting.
I could see where security teams would like that.
Yeah. See all these log entries? This is the kitchen sink of logs coming through the system.
Right.
What we've got here are a bunch of log entries that are, and if we look at the app name, hang on.
You blow that up for us a little bit?
Yeah. Let me get, yeah.
Side note, what version of Apps Manager is that?
That is a good question, Nick.
That is coming out of
this
is that
PCF 6.07. Yep.
6.07?
Yep.
Uh-huh.
What? Okay, I gotta.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a new Apps Man UI in a
I
summer
know.
release.
I was looking at this font and going, huh, that's interesting.
I wondered if you had like a pre-release or something. So
no.
No.
This was released with 6.07. So welcome to the new Apps Manager. You saw it here first.
Yeah.
Right?
Another release note that should have had a little bit more buzz. Back to all of our Opsman conversations last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I have some more homework to do. Thanks.
So first thing I want to talk about is the ingress that I got, because that syslog adapter is actually, I want the Spring Boot apps listen on 8080 by default HTTP traffic. And they also have an actuator. So they have that advanced health checking capability. So the bit of magic I have here is I have a little script I wrote because I needed the app itself inside the container to also take in that traffic on 51,000 natively. And so I wrote a little add app port script. And what it does is it just updates the, where is it here? The interesting part is it's going to update the app good entity.ports field. And it's going to add in that port that I wanted, 51,000. So when I was creating the syslog adapter, I did that. Now, I've got a few more here. I'm going to take these guys out. Remember, we were talking about domain specific. Like I can go drag and drop and create stuff. I can also have little scripts that do it. So you can see I'm going to create an IP tables logger one. And this guy will look for only the IP tables logging info. And that's an example, just like we talked about with UAA logs. The other one then is a transformer. So if we go back to the UI, I can filter to only give you a subset of the logs, but it's going to be the raw log messages, like we see here. It'll just be the ones relevant to a given app name, our subsystem in the platform. Maybe I want to clean it up a little bit more. And so where I can go there is I use filters to remove things. I can use transforms to filter out what's inside a given message. And so if I only want the syslog message, I don't want the rest of the stuff around it, I could use a transform so that I could get from the filter UAA logs, but from the transform, just the system message inside the UAA logs. And that's where the combination of filters and transformations is going to be your friend as you try to create those fit for purpose messages, especially when you start thinking about places other than a log entry as your target. You can, for example, I think are we still running the time one? No, we're not. So let me just put back the time one. So if I do time, but instead of going to log, let's pipe this one into file. And so for file, we would say, come along and say, hey, I want to put this into /temp. Again, you could volume mount. So this would land in an NFS or a Samba shared entity. And we can call it, time log. But just for the purpose of demos, I'm going to log it right into the file system inside an AI, inside an app, just to show off what's going on and how simple it is to create something other than the log entry. So we can call this time log, time to file. And we send that in. We can deploy that guy. And yeah, well, we can just give it a gig and roll that one out. Now, I was going on about the filters and the transforms and being able to create really interesting and complicated flows. And I tend to play around with tech, so I'm frankly just scraping the surface. There's so much more to Spring Cloud Data Flow than what I'm doing. I just found an interesting use case for it. And the logs you get are, let's go zoom in a bit on here. You get, oops, where did I go with that? Hang on a second, guys. Whoa, that's a bit more zoomed in than I was hoping for. So I have these logs that I created an hour ago, and what I've got is a raw set of logs, but I wanted to go to something called the IP table logger. So this is, let me deploy these guys. So I'm going to deploy these filters and transforms. Let's do that. Deploy July. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to take the syslog from the whole platform and grab just IP tables logger data. And then I want to take the IP tables logger data and look at this, groovy. So I talked about a transform with a spell, with a spell expression. You can also use it for groovy scripts. So what I did is I have an example here where this was for that customer I was talking to, where they were wanting to investigate the traffic coming out of their platform. And they were looking at, what are the apps doing? Can you give me a list of all the downstream IPs? And so this log entry is coming from a subsystem called the IP tables logger. If we look at the app name here, it's IP tables logger. But we can see a destination IP and port. We can see GUIDs for the app, the space, and the org. So we can lock in which app is talking to, say, that database of record, for example. But I felt that this was a bit too much noise and it's escaped JSON, and we wanted to clean it up. So I put a Groovy transformer in. The way I did this was I just landed the Groovy script on a statically delivered web page. So again, dogfooding, using the platform to host the script. And the script is here. We'll go and look at it in Studio while everything else is deploying. But we took the IP tables log message, which looks like this, and sent it into this transformer that would tidy it up. So the output would look more like this. And what it did was it trimmed down, let's look at our screen temp, the message to just be these specific fields. And we could do what we want with them. And I took source and target, hosts and port, timestamp, and the org space app GUIDs. I was hacking away furiously at 12:45 and didn't get finished something I was trying to just tidy up. But I wrote this little GUID enricher hack script, which is it's a way to transform through a REST call to basically Cloud Foundry any of those GUIDs into the actual name of the app or the org or the space. And again, not a very complicated app, just curling v2 apps, v2 spaces, v2 orgs, and parsing out the entity.name. But as you can see, you're going to start creating, with the combination of the filter and the transformer, a much more readable, a much more easier to consume structured output, depending on what someone needs to do.
Well, and not only that, Mark, I mean, this would allow you to take some of those logs. Maybe you want to kick off some automation of some sort based on a log entry. And you want to have your logs formatted in a very specific way so that not only are they readable, but they work for your automation. This is another way to do that as well. Exactly.
And particularly if you're going to start pushing things into systems of record or into databases, you will have to, in a lot of cases, you'll have to get the data formatted the way you want it so that you can actually message that in, get that to take in the target system. So one thing I did do.
Now that's a good point, right? I do want to highlight something there. I think what you just said about doing the database transformation, that was something that, well, hell, you were a part of it. We worked on, we had this little thing that we called Heimdall that allowed production level access, right? When developers needed to get into production, we've got an app down, system down. We created this thing called Heimdall. And one of the criteria we had on that was the ability to audit who got access and for how long. You could use this right here to actually create a persistent database record out of something like that, right?
Absolutely.
So that when audit comes back, your security teams, or you have auditors that say, hey, we need to know everybody that's had, production level access within the last 6 months. You could take this method right here, transform that into a database of record outside the platform so that you keep your separation of controls and be able to provide that record back.
Exactly. The system of the number of subsystems. So the number of subsystems in the platform is actually pretty intense. Like if I go over here, I think I got a copy of it. If I can zoom in on this guy, somebody wants a database of record just saying we want app deploy events, or we want to know any warns or errors that are coming from Blobstore or CCDB. Really important one. We want to comb the identity system, UAA, and we just care about that aspect of it. But to your point, Nikki, we want it in a database of record. We want it in a SIM, but we don't really like the SIM taking 4 terabytes a day for the 40 megabytes of logs that they care about.
Right.
And if you can get that sculpted down to just the fields they need of the subsystem in the right format, and you can even inject it into the database, essentially in a drag and drop UI style development experience. And then you can say this can be pushed into an environment and horizontally scaled and enjoy all the HA nature of the platform. You're off to the races. I think this is what's your t-shirt? I'm not a developer.
I am not a developer. That's correct.
This is in that I am not a developer compliant code development. It's almost fun. You can essentially low code, no code style drag and drop these adapters together to form outputs, to form feeds for people. And instead of codifying an app like a traditional boot or other language framework app, having to learn how to subscribe to a topic or a queue in a Rabbit or a Kafka stream, having to manage your own domain adapter like a Syslog target, to take that code base away and be able to host this and host it wherever you want, is a super powerful construct. And I just found an interesting use case here as an extension to platform operations. But this is absolutely, usable in a whole bunch of other cases too. What I really like about it though is, like, I do demos all the time. I barely go beyond Hello World, but Hello World with RabbitMQ, and you kind of got to go create your exchange and create your queues, and you kind of got to set up that boilerplate code. And it's Rabbit boilerplate code, and Rabbit is incredible. Even before you start looking at Rabbit streams and the incredible performance it has, but you're codifying to a specific middleware. I'm dragging and dropping here in a middleware neutral way. It's a whole other level of abstraction for building out these things, which can help us as operators. So yeah, like I said, a bit of a hack lab job. I was coding on, trying to get another piece working right up until the hour, and I don't see my syslog taking the feed. So what I'll do is I'll try and redeploy it. Now I have all these others that are waiting on that CF syslog target, but I've no longer got the CF syslog target. So I thought, let's try doing this live. Under the covers, there's a set of queues in Rabbit with all these messages. This is what happens under the covers. But there's no adapter feeding this anymore. We can see a lot of messages in the log test queue, but again, they're from earlier. So what do we do to deploy it? Remember, I said I wrote a script to do the really tricky one. I was in here cleaning it up while you were talking. I went in to use the Dataflow shell plugin for Cloud Foundry, CFDFSH DS1 for the name of the service. That's a Dataflow server. And now I have a set of commands. I can do stream list, for example, and it shows me what's there. I could do stream deploy, undeploy, destroy, and I destroyed the CF syslog stream. Now, if I go and we do the deploy syslog source, this is going to look for DS1 as the Dataflow service name. We want to call it CF syslog, listen of 51,000. We're in the demo space, and we're going to go to tcp.kite.fynesy.com. Now, I'm just going to check that. CF domains. Yep, TCP Kite Lab. Okay. And this is the part that you'd be, doing once, and then you can write any number of streams, because I've turned a custom syslog adapter into a tappable named destination that anyone with access to the Dataflow server can kind of tie in and build off. So what this does, it does error, but it's not a real error. What it does is it actually restages the app, having added this 51,000 app port, and it can do it too quickly so that it thinks it didn't work, but behind the scenes, the platform, because the script is not putting a big pause in there, but behind the scenes, it should restage it just fine, giving it that request to listen on more than just 8080, but to have the code base, the Spring Boot code base, also listen on 51,000. So this is getting back to the protection of apps inside Cloud Foundry and how they're not allowed to listen on all these different ports unless someone with the right permissions gives them that entitlement. So we are refreshing that. We had our format. We showed about the transformation. And
well, let's talk a few more use cases here, right? Because, we did. So Chris Phillipson jumped on and he asked us not to interrupt you, but you know how I am. I love to interrupt you, Fynesy. So, he wanted to know about the why we're doing this with syslogs, not the how. I gave some explanations. You should probably get in chat when you get a chance and look through. But I'm seeing a lot of different use cases here. We're not just talking about, shipping out just the security events, but the fact that this can be drag and drop. Your platform engineers don't need to know a lot of code to be able to set these streams up. But if you wanted to do things like red metrics, right, or you wanted to be able to transform some of those metrics to go into an accounting system like Aptio, right, and this is the way Aptio expects their logs to come in. These are all things that you could do from this, which aren't natively built into the platform. So, we kick out syslogs. Once the syslogs gets out there, you can go through with that syslog and do things with it. But this allows you to do it at source and kick it out to multiple places. There's a lot of different use cases I could see here. And this is maybe the quietest I've ever heard Nick. I mean, Nick, when you were running platforms, don't you wish you had something like this?
Yes. Sorry. I've had a lot of IT issues during this stream. On a quick side note, I figured out what it was. StreamYard set my camera to 4K, like 60.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
FPS, and it did not like it, so I fixed the glitch. But I've learned some lessons too. But yeah, I yes, I didn't even know. A lot of these things didn't even know existed until even just now. But I think too, when we're talking about even some of the new Tanzu platform logging functionality within Hub and things, you could see, we could use this to route, maybe you wanted to send some of that traffic there. You don't want to take the full platform syslog drain there. We could probably do something. I'm assuming we could do something like this with that as well, right? Because you get one target for your platform syslog drain, right?
Right.
And so
I look back to this on two levels. I look back to it on the sheer cost of managing and the raw log volume in aggregate. And then you look at which subsets of that data are of interest to which parties. And yes, you can go and dump it all into a giant or syslog driven system, index, query, and extract. But that's a highly inefficient way when you can pre-process feeds and speeds. Like, so, Nick, the HIPAA compliant apps, they don't want to have to get permission to have a Splunk operator go in every night and generate reports for them off a mega DB of terabytes of data to get who failed to log into the system today, this week, this month. They wanted, and then you get to that other point, I think, which is a brilliant one. The format matters. We don't all want escaped JSON structure. The people who are going to want that are going to want a report, and they don't want to have to codify formatters to pull out that report.
So I think let's think about this just in terms of not only ease of use, right? But let's think about this in terms of cost. Sit down with your company, sit down and really figure out what is it that you need to have for audit purposes. We said at the start of this, Splunk loves CS because of the number of logs that we kick out. But what if we could separate those logs out and only send the things that we need for audit to Splunk, the things that we might want to build dashboards and report on to Splunk, send everything else to a generic, syslog server. Think about the amount of money you could save by only bringing the stuff into Splunk that you need. And the easy thing about this is the way that you're showing it, we don't get it right the first time. Hey, we're missing X, Y, and Z going into Splunk. Fairly easy to add that stuff, right? Yep. But you're doing that at the source. You've got, your network interconnect costs, whether you're using Splunk on-prem or you're using Splunk, in the cloud, but you've got to consider that network cost. I mean, this could be a potential huge cost savings for people if you took the time to really figure out what needed to go into Splunk and what didn't. Exactly. And I'm using Splunk as the case, but this is generic, right? This could be any log aggregation platform that you want to use. It's going to cost you money, but don't sue me, Splunk. I don't mean to be.
I don't think it's actually fair on any system. The way we see sometimes people will have an architecture where they hairpin all interconnects via 1 mega Oracle database. This is our kind of default posture is the same thing, but for logging. You got when you have a platform as a service, you have app specific logs. You've got platform specific logs. You've got subsystems. Like the SIM can only take so much traffic before security event monitoring is overwhelmed. You could do, for example, here's one. You might want to check for DDoS style. Like you want to know if there's a login failure. You want to know even more if there's 5 or 10 login failures inside 1 minute on any of your apps. And in that case, it's red alert. You could dump to Redis with a time to live or Gemfire as a target sync into it with a key that has a 5-second or 10-second time to live. And if something ever has an increment of more than 1, then you got 2 within that 10 seconds and you could alert. So you can do some really sophisticated things that are really hard to query for when you just got terabytes of data in some, massive store. So you can bring in temporal insights into this in how it works. By the way, the dumping time into the file, and then I SSH'd into that AI and I just tailed the time log file in /temp, and we can see that time sync is popping in there. My syslog adapters, I think, are not feeding me live today, but the demo guides have been reasonable enough, just not perfect. But yeah, this is the system. I created these like an hour ago from this combination of deployments. So that's an example of a refined connection log. And as I said, it came from 8 lines of Groovy, which said, here are the fields I want. And I was able to stick that in as a transformer. Remember, if you need to horizontally scale any of these guys, it's the count, the instance count when you hit deploy is a parameter. You know what Cloud Foundry is going to do if any of them crash, it'll replace them. So you can have a really resilient setup here, and you can obviously build for scale around what you're doing on this front.
I don't know why you're wanting to make things easy to read. I mean, come on, that you're telling me it's hard to try to read all the escape stuff in there and you want to make it easier. That's just lazy.
I like to painfully sort through my logs via I don't know, witchcraft and wizardry. I don't know.
I'm honestly fascinated when I find out an interesting use case or an idea for an interesting use case and hack something together. It is very much a experimental hack. Full disclaimer: it isn't a public repo though. You're happy to look at the scripts and the CF commands to open up an app to listen on 2 ports or use TCP routes. But I also love that it can create a conversation starter, like native Java the other week. Not every app's going to get natively compiled, but you're going to start the conversation. How can I be more efficient? And maybe let's get most of apps to Java 21. Here we have a scenario where I showed this with somebody, but they already had the Elk stack. They already had it built. But I was able to use this. I personally learned about the subsystems in the platform with this framework because I went in and started, scraping logs for one of these guys and just taking a look and saying what's in there. And one thing that popped out was we used to, when I first described ASG logging, where we had the target ports and host for app connectivity, you could see it in something called the kernel module. But the kernel module was only showing you the instance ID. It wasn't showing you the app GUID, which would make it a really tricky thing to go and figure out, well, which app was it? Zoom the clock forward a couple of years, and we have IP tables logger in there. We have the app, the org, and the space. We know the locus of that app now. So imagine your database has foundation, org, space, and app by name. You've got them, right? You can now say this foundation, org, app, space, org, space, and app name, because the app name is venerable depending on how they do the blue-green upgrades, but the space or the org in particular, you can lock it down and you can get out what's going on. And then you start listing out the IPs they're hitting. And now you can generate that report. I could build the flow to create the report, just stick it on or have a platform feed this stream in. And now you're getting into I think about how you would do that. And then you think about how you do it in an ongoing way, where it would be something that's continuously monitoring. And it gets to be a very interesting possibility. As again, one of a bunch of possibilities and use cases. And that for what you can discover with this sort of a framework. And then, you know what? Maybe it'll jog people's... Yeah, that was the login failure one I did last week. So this is an example of me filtering out the UAA logs. And then I put a .contains filter on it because I just want login failures. And I was able to see the principal they were trying to get in from and the IP address. And so that's a very interesting tuple of data to say, I'm getting this list of failed logins. And they're going to want to know where they're coming from as someone maybe tries a whole bunch of brute force in attacking. I
wonder
if DMZ's in the audience, because I'm sure he just giggled with glee just seeing that right there.
I mean, we personally set up something very similar, not with this, but we had to do the full platform syslog drain to our SIM for PCI audience for just this. Right. But we could have just done just that instead and saved a bunch of logs.
Yeah, because there's actually in the latest, I didn't know about this, Nikki and I were just chatting about this morning. In the latest releases of TPCF, you can actually create different aggregate drains. So you could leave what you have. You could keep using Elk or Splunk or whatever you've got, but you could add a secondary drain. You could send it over to a system like this. It could be running in an ISO-SEGIN platform. And you could create now some dedicated streams, and you might be able to create a much more real-time or lower overhead mechanism. And you know what? If you pulled out all the information that's important automatically, then it gets very interesting as to what kind of spend you need to keep the data hot in an active SIM versus archival. Because we might not get rid of it completely, but if we can put it into super cheap, because we don't need it hot indexable, because we're not generating monthly reports all the time or weekly reports, we've got the information coming dedicated in a dedicated format to an event stream. If we need to, we can pull out of archive the huge feed of data, but we wouldn't need to do it. We wouldn't need to retain. So again, I think there's some economic reasons to explore what this can do together with some operational efficiencies, because it being in a SIM doesn't mean everybody has the data they need from the platform. And often that operational tool that's keeping all of the logs is not multi-tenant accessible to the world, quite the contrary. I've yet to see SIM operators be gratuitous with what's allowed to be viewed in there for obvious reasons.
Well, and one other thing to add there is that when you look at this is another one of those features that we probably should have talked a little bit more about, but the aggregate syslog where you can add multiples. but that is that's an all or nothing, right? And that's great if that's what you want to do. You want to capture everything. I think your approach is just an approach that allows you to be a little bit, take the scalpel to the logs, figure out what you want, carve out the things that you need, and then let everything else either go or go to a repository to kind of, stay and die if you want it to, for lack of a better term. So, huge feature release to allow multiple syslogs now, but it's an all or nothing. This approach really lets you take a fine edge to it and figure out what you want.
And there's just something that I was just going through the chat, and it just made me think of something. I've only ever talked about this in the context of filtering and reducing the amount of logs that comes from a TPCF foundation. I have never thought about it in the context of aggregating information from the log stream from different foundations. And that's a no-brainer. I don't have to just have one syslog. I could have a syslog listener per foundation, and I could feed that report with, like I was saying, foundation org space app name, target IP, et cetera, et cetera. So again, we get back to maybe we have information we want to combine from different foundations. And again, it's a framework. You can drag and drop and create the flows that make sense based off your business needs or operational needs or security needs. What I really like is it's practically turnkey. It's built into a TAS Foundation marketplace. Operationally, to set up anything that can process thousands and thousands of messages per second is usually a pretty big ask. And in this case, just give it a beefy ISO segment to run syslog processors that are capacitized. But that's kind of not even needed to get started. So again, really excited about the power of something like this, and always interested in what people think they could do with it, because again, I'm dabbling and I think I have a few use cases that are interesting. I'm certain there's many, many more.
Oh yeah, I could see a ton of these, man. Being able to, look at the event-driven, what the CF events are, create kind of your own red metrics based for your company. DevOps taking out, again, the events to see, do we have an app that's constantly failing? Again, self-healing can hide problems with applications, but if you're able to really kind of pick out those logs and say, hey, I want to know every time something crashes, and making a time series out of that, you could probably pinpoint logs that may be causing problems or having problems. Tons of uses on this, right? Like I said, a flow, creating something that could go into an accounting system like Aptio, I think would be huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so many possibilities here. It'd be interesting if we get this out there to see what customers would want to do with it.
Exactly. And it also opens the door to people thinking about, because I heard PCF as that appliance that runs microservices. I have not heard about it as that engine for event-driven processing or batch processing, and it's right there in the making. Yep.
Well, that's great. Well, hopefully, Chris, we answered your question on the why. And then, Fynesy was able to show us the how. I see another blog entry in our future on this one too, Fynesy. So I think, we were talking about creating a blog for the Java optimizer to be a little bit more succinct with that. I think this is probably something we should work on as well. So when we get that out there, we'll make sure to put it in the notes. We are coming up on end of time. So, I want to go with the obligatory. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you're notified when things come out. And, do a quick reminder. We've got CF Days Europe coming out, Nick.
Yes. Yeah. And we will both be there. So you should definitely check us out. And if you are watching and you want to join the panel, we are still looking to add some additional customers or Cloud Foundry users to the panel. So please keep us in mind. And if you ever want to come and talk on the show, we didn't see Dobbs today, but if anybody wants to tell their Cloud Foundry story, please let us know. We'd love to have you on the show.
But we did see Anbu. Anbu?
Yes.
Reach out to us on LinkedIn, man. Not only do we want to bring you on the show, you had an integral part. Your very first show that we did, you did something that's become a part of the show at every closing. So if you're able to reach out to us, we would love to be able to get you on an episode, talk to you about what you're getting out of the show, and talk about how you became a part of the show with one comment. Right? So,
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks again to Fynesy for coming on the show and sharing. I learned a lot today, so I'm very interested to see how we could take this further.
Oh, so welcome. It was
Absolutely.
great fun, guys, and the demo guys are reasonable. Given I think we set this up in the last 18 hours.
Just so everybody knows, this is where Fynesy's awesome. We had another episode that we had planned for today. There were some scheduling conflicts that happened, and so we literally told him last night, "Hey, man, can you do a show with us and go over some of the new stuff that you're doing?" And he jumped on there. So always the professional. Fynes jumped in and saved us for just having me and Nick here talk with glare on our forehead. So appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right.
All right.
So with that, we'll do 3, 2, 1. CF bye. Sound good?
All right.
All right. 3, 2, 1. CF bye.
CF bye, everybody.
See you.